morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I think we've got over 500 people registered for this event, and I'm super excited about today's webinar because we'll be unveiling our new avatar of the OneOffice. We launched this OneOffice in 2016 with the whole vision that, the lines between front, middle, and back should blur, and there's only one office that should matter, and that's the office that caters to the customer. And as we looked at AI emerging and services as software as a new category starting to emerge, this one office is more important than ever. And that's what I and my colleague Melissa are here today to talk about, why we need the one office more than ever before, because AI is actually amplifying some of the experience layers that are broken today. So let's get going. Just a few housekeeping rules. We are just muting everybody right now. But it will be very interactive. There is a Q&A sort of widget on your Zoom applications. Start typing in your questions. Melissa and I will do our best to answer as many as we can throughout the session, and we'll spend maybe the last 10-15 minutes just going through the questions as well. And then this webinar is being recorded. It will be posted on the HFS website, and we'll share both the deck and the recording once it's complete. So let's get going. What we wanted to cover today was why we see both customer experience and employee experience, despite the promise of AI, continues to be broken. And I think the reason there is we are in 2026 trying to apply AI to everything that we are doing, but our operating model hasn't changed for the last 20 years. And I think that operating model, that blueprint, is the OneOffice from our perspective. And that's what we want to launch today, unveil our thinking of how we think about this operating model that should drive the AI ambitions in terms of realizing your CX and EX. We'll try and give you some real world experiences and what we've seen in the market on both success stories as well as failure stories as we go through it today. HFS has been at it for the last almost 15 years now. We were the ones who launched RPA, but one of my personal favorite frameworks that we've come up with, and a huge amount of kudos to Melissa, because she was the real architect behind the OneOffice when we launched it in 2016. And really the premise was a unified front to back operations driven by data automation and customer centricity. That model has stood the test of time, and perhaps it's even more vital today, because when we coined this term services as software in 2024, as AI starts to take over more and more work that humans were supposed to do, the CX and the EX layer is exposed much more. And unless you have a strong operating model behind it, it's going to amplify the issues, not resolve the issues. So that's really what we're going to talk about today. I think the focus is going to be on services as software, and how do you make services as software a reality using the OneOffice operating model behind it. We've obviously used a ton of data. If you've not seen our latest HFS Data Intelligence Suite, please go and check it out. We've got a couple of fantastic products like this Enterprise Mandate, which compiles over 500,000 data points on all kinds of AI questions that we've been asking. We've done like 12,000 plus interviews with enterprises over the last 18 months or so, and we've packaged all of that into this tool. We've actually used this tool to generate some of the charts today, so you'll see how powerful it is. And then you should also look at the Agentic and the Gen AI Compass, which has over 1,800 actual use cases, actual case studies of Agentic AI across different industries, across different functions, that you can start to use to get inspired by what AI can do for you. But let's get going. So I think services as software, we are in a category creation moment right now. This is a moment unlike anything that I've seen, at least in my career. Why do I say that? Look at the price to sales ratio of what's happening in the market today. We all saw what happened to the Accenture stock, despite strong earnings statement. They were growing at 6% or so. The market cap tanked by 20%. And Accenture is not the only one. Look at all the blue bars here, with the exception of IBM. Every one of the leading IT services provider, every one of the leading GSIs has a price to sales ratio of 1.5x, which is almost commodity level PSR ratios. Because the average S&P PSR is 3.7x, so it's even below the average across the S&P 500. And on the other hand, look at the orange bars. Look at the AI native PSRs. They're at, on an average, 40x. There's some crazy numbers in there. 20 to 100x kind of price to sales ratio. So it's almost becoming like a tale of two cities, where the legacy service companies are losing market cap. We predicted this in 2024. That's why we called out the whole new category of services as software. I won't go through the detail of this. I've talked enough about this for the last 2 years. But on the left-hand side, assume there was no AI in the market. The global technology services were growing at 5 to 7%. It would have, today they're about $1.5 trillion. They would have doubled in the next 10 years. The B2B software market is roughly around $1 trillion today, and it's growing at 10-15%, and it would have almost trebled in the next 10 years. But that's not the case. The market is not standing still, and we've got Agentic AI, we've got Gen AI, and as a result, there's almost a new category that's being created, which is that orange triangle, what we call services as software, that's going to absorb revenue from both technology services and software. And as a result, legacy services will see a deflation. But the interesting and the exciting part is this is a category creation moment for all our system integrators, GSIs, and in fact for the enterprises on trying to look at services in a completely different way, which should drive a lot more productivity. It should drive better decision-making capabilities or predictive capabilities. It should drive better business outcomes. But fundamentally, it should drive better experiences. It should drive better experiences for our customers. It should drive better experiences for our employees. On top of that, there is this little undefined triangle, because on one hand, we expect these services to shrink, but on the other hand, we also expect services to explode, because you can now address a number of new segments that were unavailable. Look at the mid-market. For example, it was very hard to serve the mid-market till now with the legacy labor arbitrage-driven model. It was very hard to serve, the developing world with the legacy services because of that. But those segments start to open up, and so I think while there will be contraction, and that's what the market is pricing right now, we at HFS remain very bullish about the services market, because I think there is net new opportunity there. So overall, there is a category creation moment that we are going through. It's backed up by the data that we are seeing. As you can see, we reached out to about 600 IT and business decision makers. And while there is going to be decrease in your regular staff augmentation, the technology-enabled services, which is the current legacy services, are going to be somewhat flat. The biggest growth is going to come from services as software, where services are becoming more and more productized and almost being consumed like a software. But having said that, the promise is amazing. The promise is fantastic. But in the real world, the experience has not been that. We've done so many different studies, and only about 13% of the enterprises across the global 2000 have reached some level of AI maturity. Uh, in fact, 86% of these enterprises don't really have an AI strategy. A lot of AI strategy is just FOMO. Is just I need I need some AI in my enterprise, but what do you do with it? And the fundamental issue behind that is all the enterprise debts that uh, that the large enterprises, large global 2000 companies have. We just launched this study where we tried to size these four enterprise debts. The legacy technology debt of a spaghetti of systems, the data debt where we don't know what's the right data, is my data AI ready, the process debt, where we continue to do the same things over and over again without really reimagining our workflows, and the talent debt, where on one hand we don't have enough AI ready talent, but on the other hand, people are worried about their jobs. So I think the technology is ready, but we as enterprises are not. And the fundamental reason is that we are using a 2010 operating model trying to capture the 2026 value. That is fundamentally not going to work, right? If we don't change the ways of working, how our organizations are structured, what role does IT play, what role does business play, how do you collapse these boundaries between front, middle, and back office? Uh, Whether it's AI or some magic bullet, none of it will work. And that is essentially what we want to talk about. I think our answer to this operating model question is the OneOffice. And I'll hand it over to Melissa, who knows a lot more about OneOffice than me, to take us through it.
That was a great way to set the context, Saurabh. I think this new category creation is really important. And the OneOffice actually hasn't become less relevant. It's just changed. AI has just sort of amplified what the changes that we do need to make. And so, yeah, I was proud to be a part of the team that put out the first OneOffice back in 2016. And it was all about sort of breaking down the silos within the organization so that there's a continuous flow of intelligence and information, and making sure that employee experience and customer experience were balanced at the same level, because that is so, and still is so important. I think that the agentic element, that the bringing in of AI and LLMs has just amplified this even more, and it's put some more dynamics around it, and that's what we want to talk through today. So the more vital today in the services as software era than ever before. Historically, we worked with humans consistently, across everything. We were always the ones who were absorbing the work, the siloed data, the tribal knowledge, the front to back issues. So agents are now sitting across front, back, and middle office, and we can't turn our backs on that. We have to understand how those are working together. The technology piece, Saurabh, you said it perfectly. This is not a technology conversation. This is it's a debts conversation that we have around our data, people, processes. And we need to focus towards outcomes, not effort. And the changes that are happening within the industry that we follow most closely, the services industry, are massive. So there's this huge opportunity that Saurabh showed in the services as software slide. And there's also this kind of gray area where it's like, what is this going to look like? And OneOffice is our view of how we feel folks are going to be able to survive this, and still think about experiences in the way that we always wanted to, the way that we have since 2016. And experiences being broken isn't anything new. It's just amplified by by new technologies and new ways of working. So with that, this is our new services as software HFS OneOffice. We want to spend some time talking you through this because we've adapted it, we've changed it, and we've really put a huge focus on the shared responsibility between IT and business, which is more important than ever. So the fundamentals are the same. CX and EX are inextricably connected. Business and IT sharing accountability has always been important. It's more so now that they're joined at the hip. And continuous improvement now needs to replace sort of handoffs, right? So this is a virtuous cycle that works throughout the organization. This is an operating model where we're going to, as an organization, own the outcomes around experience. And the thinking has to change, the mindset has to change. Is the employee getting a better outcome? Is the customer getting a better outcome? These are things that we need to start tracking, measuring, and really trying to understand the impact on business, because otherwise things will fall apart. So we want to do a little bit of we can talk about this a bit more, Saurabh. I know we want to dive into the specifics of it, but we wanted to get a gut check from the room too, to see how you're all feeling about whether or not customer and employee experiences are actually aligned to business outcomes. Is this just a layer that's floating out in space? Is this something that is not really, a strategic imperative at the C-suite at your organizations? How aligned do you actually feel that experience is? Is it a strategic KPI, or is it, you're mostly aligned, you've got some functions working together, you can patch up some gaps? That would be a good place to be, honestly. But I do fear that there's a lot of organizations that are more poorly aligned. Experiences and business objectives aren't really connected, or really understanding how experiences are having an impact. So please just vote and we'll discuss the results. So we'll give you a minute to do that, to think about it. But in the meantime, Saurabh, I wanted to let you weigh in on our new framework, which is new and improved. Fundamentals are still the same, but what to you has fundamentally changed here that we needed to update for this new services as software era?
You're absolutely right, Melissa. I think the fundamentals are the same. We need to have better experiences. If by adding AI to our enterprises, we are not amplifying customer experience and we're not improving the lives of our employees, what are we doing? What's the point of all of this? So I think the fundamentals are the same. I think the fundamental point of front, middle, back alignment that we kept talking for the last 10 years in OneOffice are also the same. But I think the convergence between business and IT is what's the key to all of this. What is the key to unlock all of this? Because you're deploying all these agents. Is that a business responsibility, or is it an IT responsibility, or is it both? And I think the answer is it's a shared responsibility. It's a shared accountability. And unless we design our operating model where both business and IT are working together, this thing ain't gonna work. The other thing that has obviously changed in this OneOffice model is now we have AI agents. So it's a human plus machine model. So we have AI agents at work. But again, the question is, that's where the business should set the policy, IT should build and run it, and both business and IT should have the joint outcome ownership with, call it human in the loop, call it human in the helm, but some human oversight built in. I think the other piece that we've really amplified is the trust and governance piece, because one of the biggest issues is, do I actually trust this AI agent to tell me the right thing or not? And finally, how do you keep improving it? This is not a one and done exercise. This is a journey. And anybody who says agentic AI is going to give you the ROI in like the next 2 weeks is, I don't know, smoking what. So I think the whole continuous improvement. So I think it's a new and improved model. From the fundamentals remain the same, but the point around, how do we drive a customer experience where if I'm calling a call center, I'm always the first in line. I don't have to wait for 20 minutes. I think that has to be the ambition. And if I'm the employee, uh, I'm having a fantastic experience with all these chat GPTs and Claudes of the world on a Sunday, but I have a really poor experience on a Monday where I have to still struggle with SharePoint and all the other things. How do I get a better experience? So I think that's really what we're going for. But we've got this poll results, Melissa. Only 6% are highly aligned. So
Can we share that on,
what do you?
are we sharing this?
Yeah, I
With,
I can see it on my
I
screen.
can
So
see it
it
too.
it
Okay,
says on.
good.
So
Because I'm
only
actually,
6% are highly aligned.
I'm very heartened by the thought that there's some mostly aligned at 50%, at 49%, because that means you can incrementally improve. But agree, like being only 6% being highly aligned, that means our one office needs to jump in and be the hero here.
Couldn't agree more. All right, let's keep moving.
So these sort of aspirations are really high, right? So if we go to the next data point, I think it's around our expectations. Yeah. So there's an expected impact of AI on both customer interactions, CX engagement, loyalty, and on workplace, workforce productivity. So we definitely, as enterprise leaders, are all gung ho that this stuff is going to work. It's gonna help our people internally. It's going to help our customers as we work with them. But there is a bit of a gap, which we need to highlight, and then we'll get to how we can remedy it. There's a gap in, we go to the next one. Okay, yeah, so here are those are some of the examples of how we can, how folks are actually using agentic. This happens to be from an agentic study that we did, how people are using this technology and EX and CX actual use cases to be able to help with, help desk automation if you're an employee, or around creating personalized offers for customers. So there's a lot of this stuff actually in work. I think the thing is, and the gap between that 49% and the 6% that's actually able to feel as though they have the full picture is, we've found some good use cases that work, but how do we bridge the gap and get to a more holistic experience where the front, middle, and back office are actually collapsed? So going to the next one, Saurabh, this is the gap that we were actually talking about, which is the ROI expectations are tremendous. And this data point is in particular for customer experience around chatbots, virtual agents, and customer-facing AI. But we're nowhere near reaching that ROI, right? So we see the proof points, we're optimistic, there are bits and pieces where we see this stuff working. How do we get to the other end where we're actually able to fix customer and employee experience and use that to align to business outcomes is the next step. So I think we might all agree, at least from even from a consumer standpoint, we all experience broken customer experiences. We all experience frustrations in our day-to-day work life. These things are very linked. If you don't have employees that are incentivized, that are plugged in, that have the right tools, you can't then promote the customer experience that's going to come from the other end of it. So again, just to reiterate what we've been saying, AI is not going to fix the experiences. It's going to amplify them if we don't rewire how we work. So this is an operating model issue. just to take a couple of examples that I think we can all relate to. You've got a situation where you're a customer, you've complained, or you've tried to follow up on an issue or an order 2, 3, 4 times, different channels. What then happens? You end up posting about it. It erodes trust. It breaks the trust within the customer and enterprise relationship. Or you've got someone who found a new tool, this manager who is really excited about getting high performing salespeople or whatever it may be working. He's got his own AI subscription, but then he can't go use it in his actual practical life day to day. They end up quitting, right? You lose talent if you're not enabling them, if you're putting them behind committees or putting them behind organizational blocks. So want to just get into a little bit before we get to the resolution, which is, why are these things broken? Why is CX broken? Why is EX broken? And I've thought through this a lot, being a CX analyst for most of my career and working in CX very deeply in my background. We can talk about process debt, people debt, and all this stuff, all day long. But really what it boils down to in a lot of the examples that you see is around just lack of leadership, right? So you've got siloed data. You've got handoffs instead of continuous improvements, like we talk about in the OneOffice. You've got AI that's a band-aid slapped on broken processes. You've got stuff that's not being measured the right way. I mean, I would argue CSAT is something that you have to keep measuring. You want to keep measuring, but also think about what other things can you look at to measure. Is it, the way that your customers are engaging with you? We need to find new ways to measure these things. So there are some issues there with a lack of leadership, or maybe it's a lack of coordination of leadership, frankly, which lead to broken CX. And why is EX broken? I mean, this is just one of many things. I think if you speak within organizations, there's always going to be, varying levels of, I have frustration with working with my IT systems, or I have frustration with XYZ. But in this particular instance, what we are focusing on is around actually using AI at work. And that was the example that we showed earlier, where if you have employees that are excited to use something, they're excited to use new tools, they're getting jazzed up about their job, but you end up putting them behind a bunch of paywalls, or rather red tape walls that they can't get past within their organization. They're not going to feel safe. They're not feeling safe experimenting with AI. Their fear of being judged if their experiments fail, and they're not feeling safe trying new things. So this is what is leading to what we call the EX velocity gap. And this is where you've got folks that are getting very comfortable with AI in their personal lives. I know I use it all the time. I don't cook anything anymore without consulting my Claude or my ChatGPT. I hate to admit it, I've never been a good cook, but that just happens to be my use case, right? And my worst case scenario is I screw up the meatloaf. We have a tolerance for imperfection. We have immediate ROI if it works out well. We can experiment with it real time. We're getting comfortable with the tools. But then when we go to work on Monday, so this is a Sunday versus Monday experience that Saurabh alluded to earlier. When we go to work on Monday, there's a frustration around not being able to share this information across the organization. You've got tribal knowledge, which has always been an issue, again, exacerbated by, I've got my LLM and it doesn't speak to yours. We've got compliance issues, obviously, and you've got a governance vacuum. Like, who's actually in charge here? Who's leading this? How are we managing this? How are we working through it? So there's a frustration that's building within employees that actually really want to use these tools. They want to use them to advance their own careers, to help organizations. This is one of the things that we feel needs to be fixed, needs to be remedied with the OneOffice, to be able to help boost your employees to do their best job and use AI.
Yeah, Melissa, there are a number of questions, and I think there is a related one. So let me ask you this. How do you work with a team of business people and get them to understand that the techos are not in charge when they've been mocking them for the past 20 years?
This is a cultural issue, isn't it?
It, it is a cultural issue, and I think that's what this one office is talking about, right? The whole point around shared accountability. It's not one versus the other. And I think that's right now a lot of experiences in my mind, and would love to hear your take on this, is broken because IT blames the business and business blames the IT.
Yeah.
And so it's, Melissa, you didn't do this, and you'll say, Saurabh, you didn't do this, right? And then ultimately either that's the scenario one that you were saying, that's what really happens, is the customer is the one that, but I think the point is, once AI agents come into the picture, now there could have been some superhero human who was absorbing all this tension and trying to be the band-aid uh, to to get through this friction. AI agents can't be that one. And so I think the one office becomes even more important today, where you need to have shared accountability. But what's your take, Melissa?
Yeah. No, putting that shared accountability in sort of a mandate, I think, because otherwise change doesn't happen. We can say kumbaya and we're all going to work well together, but unless you say you're both accountable for these outcomes, how are we measuring it? How are we looking at it? And then putting that in a group, right? And we talk a little bit about cross-functional pods and some of the intricacies of how you can do that. Those are probably more offline conversations, which we're happy to have. But it comes very directly from, it has to be an acknowledged cultural issue, and putting those two organizations together to say you're both, whether it's a shared P&L for experience, put these things together and you're accountable for it. Do you
Yeah,
agree?
I I completely agree. There's one more question, Melissa, before we move on, that I'd like to address, and somebody's been looking at our data very closely. Someone picked up the point that talent debt is the smallest amongst all the debts that
Yes.
we outlined, and the question is, why is it so small? And my response to that is, first of all, talent debt was $1 trillion. So $1 trillion by no stretch of imagination is small on an absolute number. But I guess the question is, on a relative basis, why is it small? And I think there are two or three reasons. One is talent debt actually cuts across all the other debts. A lot of technology debt is because of talent, a lot of data debt is because of talent, a lot of process debt, especially, is because of talent. So I think it's very hard to isolate what your talent debt is. And then secondly, this was done by conversation. That whole exercise on the debt study was done by conversations with 2,000 enterprises. And what I found was, it's very hard for people to put a number to it. Of what if I resolve the talent debt? What will be the number of either growth or cost savings? Everybody understands it, that it's going to be very, very important, but it's very hard to put a number to talent debt. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why it comes across as small. But I think it's felt, if you look at that whole study on enterprise debts, you'll see that talent debt sort of cuts across practically every talent, and culture cuts across everything else in there. So it's the manifestation of talent debt is much bigger than what that slide alluded to.
You're right. And I'll add one thing, which is, yeah, they completely overlap. Couldn't agree more. Um, we were at a roundtable recently, both you and I, where we were pressure testing that data with a bunch of enterprise leaders. And I remember it being pointed out, okay, talent's the smallest debt. And what did we spend most of that day talking about? It
Talent.
was
Yeah.
a lot about talent, right? And it was really important for folks because that's where it all comes from, right? How are you going to fix process? How are you going to fix tech? How are you going to fix data? without having the right talent. So we ended up spending most of the day talking about that. So I think it's maybe an under, I don't want to say that certainly the data is compelling, but it's probably an underlooked at debt. And that's why I keep going back to, I called it leadership debt earlier. Somebody at that round table said imagination debt. Remember that?
Yes, there are lots of other debts that are coming through.
Okay, because I couldn't resist putting chicken nuggets in a webinar. Um, this is just a couple of examples of, what happens AI done wrong, and these are examples that folks know and that they're aware of. So just pointing it out, AI being a band-aid on things that doesn't necessarily work. Processes weren't fixed before it was rolled out. So the the implications come out very publicly. They erode public trust. They erode their customer experience, and their employee experience. So without going into tremendous depth, because I'm sure people are familiar with these, there was an Air Canada situation where a bereavement policy was misconstrued by an AI agent, and they were found legally implicated in an issue where they basically had to give refunds that they didn't intend to give. Klarna said that we can do all of our customer service with AI. We're firing everybody. And then they realized that they couldn't, had to hire them all back. Well, how does that look from a customer standpoint? And then how does that look like from, do I want to work for this company that, didn't value me 6 months ago and come back? Um, and McDonald's had the famous runaway nuggets example, where AI was just doing wacky things like putting bacon on ice cream and ordering people thousands of nuggets at a time. It's just it's kind of a funny way to put it. And all these brands are really good brands. We're not here to, say that they're not worthwhile, but we're here to say that these are the public implications that can come from not thinking through and slapping AI like a band-aid on a process or especially on a customer or employee facing situation. Okay, so what we do want to talk about is, how do you move forward? Like how do we fix some of these things? So getting from I've just completed a study, or we're working on completing a study with two of my colleagues, Jason and Krupa, who are in my experience pod with me. We are working through a customer experience study right now, and we're actually finding examples where folks are looking at customer experience. And I do want to be very clear also on the customer experience piece. We're not just talking about contact center transformation. It's a huge part of it. Customer service is an issue. The service providers that play in this space, yes, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of changes, but we're not just talking about contact center. We're talking about a broader sort of like, are you thinking through that customer's journey? Are you thinking through the different lines of business that your customer might be interacting with within your organization? You can go back, Saurabh, yeah. So these are some of the examples that we're getting from that study, which is coming out later this month or possibly early next month, where folks are getting results that are not just about efficiencies. You remember CX and EX studies that we've done in the past. It was all about, how do we make this more efficient? How do we save money? It's a lot more than that. They're getting results that are around customer satisfaction, less customer hold time. How many of us have ever been on hold for forever saying agent, agent, representative, representative? And again, that is a contact center issue, but it's part of a broader problem. From a analytics standpoint, you understanding why people are calling in and trying to prevent that from the beginning rather than handling it when it comes in. And around service transformation, it's not just about deflection, it's about satisfaction. Are agents able to use their time wisely, whether it's a human or AI agent? And customers get a smoother, faster experience. So we're actually seeing the proof in the pudding. And the 49% that are on this call that are saying that they're joining things up, I think that you'd probably agree. And these are the fundamentals of the difference, where if you're using OneOffice principles, it's around understanding the experience, right? Like as I was saying, it's not just about your contact center. It's about a lot more than that. It's about figuring out the silos that are within your organization. If you're going to put an AI-enabled chatbot, is it just going to, more eloquently spit out a bunch of FAQs, or is it going to be able to go back into your fulfillment, your supply chain, and pull out and say, this is why your order's been disrupted, and this is how we're going to fix it. So it's a lot around design and mapping. The second difference we'd point out is about what Saurabh and I have been hammering home, which is make it shared. So putting business and IT together to be accountable for that. Firstly, you can't scale without creating those guardrails and the governance piece. And then once you have picked a journey, you show the value. And one of the other things in that talent conversation I kept hearing at the roundtable was around find your champions. When you get people excited about this, they're going to find more examples. They're going to find more use cases and say, why aren't we applying AI to this? Why aren't we thinking about this process in a different way and completely reimagining it? And that's, I think, where change really happens. Because when people start to get excited, when people see the value, things start moving forward. Yeah, one last point around we're going to wrap up here and then open up for questions. So what's next? I do want to just mention something around agentic commerce, because this is, your customers aren't necessarily going to be humans as well, right? So this is part of the broader conversation about human and AI working together. My colleague, Ashish Chaturvedi, he's doing a lot of work around this because he's our retail and CPG guru. So between me and him, if you have questions on agentic commerce, we're happy to discuss. But this is something that's rapidly rising, and the stats are showing it. So you've got, a tremendous amount of orders coming through agents, agentic customers rather than human customers. E-commerce is changing to become more agent driven. So the proof is here around agentic commerce being part of it, and organizations. This is again another rabbit hole that we could go down, but we'll just place it here for thoughts to move forward for, which is restructuring your front end, whether it's your website, your chatbots, your customer facing pieces, so that they're able to be discovered and understood by robotic agents, not just by, human consumers. That's something I think a lot of organizations are going to need to think through moving forward. Saurabh, I'll let you bring us home.
Yeah, I know this has been a fantastic conversation and there are tons of questions, but I think if there were 5 or 7 key takeaways, I think the first one is AI is not some magic bullet that will solve all your challenges. CX and EX, in fact, the broken experience layer, AI amplifies it versus just solve it by just introducing AI. Unless you change your operating model, this won't work. Same is the case with scaling AI. Everybody in every nook and corner has a very successful AI pilot, but only 1 in 10 enterprises are able to scale it. I call it death by 1,000 POCs is what's happening right now. And again, the question is, what is your operating model? Business and IT, the crux of the operating model is business and IT have to work together. They have to have shared accountability. In fact, I'd go to the extent of saying that every business person needs to understand technology today, and every IT or technology person needs to understand the context of the business. Unless these two things come together, AI is going to be a shiny new object. And my worst fear is that this whole AI bubble that we are creating, or the whole AI balloon that we are creating, those crazy PSRs that we are seeing, it will burst if we don't change our operating model, if we don't address the enterprise debts, because otherwise it's just another technology and another hammer looking for a nail. Also, what Melissa alluded to, this whole agentic commerce, your next customer might be an AI agent. Just like we are trying to figure out what does the human plus AI workforce look like, we need to figure out what will be the experience for your AI agent customer. And I think that's going to be an important question that we need to all think through. But finally, I think if there was one key takeaway from this whole 45, 50 minutes of our conversation, it's that OneOffice is not a new concept. We launched it in 2016. We talked since the last 10 years. We've been rambling, merge, collapse these silos between front, middle, and back, get IT and business to work together, focus on CX and EX. I think those things continue to be very important, in fact, more important than ever in today's world, so in services as software, because now we don't have a human buffer to put in between front, middle, back, to put in between IT and business. We have to resolve our operating model issues. Otherwise, we won't be able to meet our AI ambitions. So with that, let me stop sharing. We've got tons of questions here, Melissa. I think we've got 10 minutes. We've got like at least 25 questions here. we did take some of them, but let me ask you this: can you talk about the causal sort of interplay between EX and CX? Because we still see most of the use cases being either CX or EX. How do they sort of work together?
That's a great question. CX is really, if you think about it, it ends up being sort of an output of employee experience in one way or another, whether it's very directly or whether it's roundabout. So at a very sort of basic level, I came from a contact center background, so that's kind of an easy one for me to go to, which is if you've got a poorly trained, down and out call center agent or chat agent, whatever it may be, contact center, they're not going to be motivated or excited about helping a customer. They also might not have the tools at their fingertips to be able to help the customer. And that's one of the, very basic examples, but it's all too prevalent in this, in this world. And people say, okay, well, calls are going down. You're not going to be contacting companies anymore because it's all automated. That's not true. The contact center market is growing because interaction volumes continue to grow, because broken processes mean that issues that could have been proactively fixed aren't. So people are still reaching out and they still are wanting human contact, or they're just wanting to be able to fix their problem. I don't know if they actually even care sometimes if it's a human or a bot that's fixing their problem, but they do want help. And if you've got someone who's dejected and they're not being motivated properly, in some cases they really don't have great, workplace health, they're not empowered, they're not enabled to help the customer. So that's just kind of like a simple example. At a broader example, I've heard, I think maybe the concept of CX isn't really well understood within leadership. I mean, do you feel as though your finance officers are thinking about your customer? Are your procurement people thinking about your customer? For sure, marketing and service thinks about customers, but everything that happens within an enterprise ends up touching the customer in one way or another, right? So if you don't have that culture more broadly, you're not making decisions that have the customer's best interest in mind. And it's not just like a feel-good thing, like we should do the right thing for our customers. No, your customers pay your bills and they make you grow, and it creates loyalty and they come back to you. So it's really more of a broader like mentality and thinking about, how do we make our employees excited and feeling empowered about what's our vision, what's our mission, what do we care about as an organization? And ultimately that feeds your customer, that helps your customer in one way or another. Otherwise, they wouldn't be buying something from you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Melissa. I just changed our internet service provider at my house, not because the customer agent was bad, but because the billing experience was really bad. And now is finance a back office? But finance is what led me to switch, right? So I think that's exactly what you're what you're talking about. Hey, there's one question which is easy enough, so I'll answer the easy ones and I'll pass on the difficult ones to you, Melissa, which is there a battle-tested ROI-enabled use case library that HFS plans to publish for financial services? The answer is we already have it. We've published it. I referred to it in the opening remarks. We have a tool that our clients can access. It's called the Gen AI and Agentic AI Compass, which as of today has about 1,800 battle-tested use cases of Agentic AI and Gen AI. You can sort of slice and dice it by financial services, CX, EX, whatever you're interested in. And it'll give you a real world, the case studies that Melissa was showing you actually comes from that tool. So the answer is yes. It already exists. Just get in touch with us. Here's another question, Melissa. A lot of the world in the outsourced world is complex. Clients are paranoid about their data, and it is difficult to convince for a vendor to do a full sweep of the bottlenecks. And as a result, AI is targeted towards a point solution versus the bigger problem. The question is, I'm curious how the world is still thinking to solve this. You're on mute.
This has been an age-old problem with outsourcing in general, but with customer data, there are regulations. There's also cultural issues. There's a bit of paranoia. Saurabh, is the question more about how do you get trust towards sharing the data, or do you think it's more about how do you change your operating models?
I think the question is, given that everybody is so paranoid about this is top secret and this is classified and this is that, you end up solving point solution issues versus bigger underlying issues. How do you get through that? And I think my answer to that is, it is not about getting access to the data. It's about telling the client what the operating model should be for them. In fact, one of the pet peeves that I've heard every client talk about GSIs and service providers is they just do what I tell them to do. And they do it well, they do it fast and efficiently, but they don't come back to me on telling me what I need to do better. And I think it's not about having access to the data, but have you told the customer on what they need to do, what the operating model needs to look like? Now, we like the OneOffice, you may like something else, but have you actually told that client? And I think ultimately it's a partnership. This whole word outsourcing is wrong. Outsourcing essentially means that you're throwing it over the fence and now it's your problem, right? And I think the reality is it's got to be a partnership. The service providers are good at some things, but the client is better at some other things, right? And how do you work together is probably the answer.
Yeah, you have to partner together. And this ties into our whole conversation about the economy moving towards the services as software, right? Because you cannot operate in that model without thinking through outcomes. And what's been described as, oh, I'm paranoid, I'm afraid to share, I'm afraid to show my data or, get to the underlying issue. You can't operate towards outcomes if you're going to work that way. You actually need to share information. Point solutions are okay, in certain situations, but if you're going to try and manage to change to outcomes, like, are we going to try and grow, or is this just about cutting costs? That's a completely different conversation. And I think this is where the whole the whole services industry is moving, but it's challenging for organizations who have always bought customer service outsourcing and had that mentality around it, because as long as you don't think through outcomes in a more sort of growth and business oriented way, you're not going to be able to reap the benefits.
Yeah. And there's one last question, probably in the time that we have, is what about the recent announcements that AI companies have made about they themselves coming into the consulting world? And I think the question is referring to the
Yeah.
Anthropic announcement of get creating a consulting company focused on the mid market. OpenAI is doing the same. What are your thoughts on that, Melissa?
There's going to be a convergence, right? Like they're still going to need, they're still going to need professional services that have domain expertise. That's what they don't have. Um,
Yeah,
so I feel like that category, while they might, make some inroads, doing some consulting, whatever it is that they're doing, the traditional partners, or maybe traditional is not the right word to say, the evolving traditional partners are still going to play a big role, because they're the ones who understand their customers' business in and out. They have industry expertise. They have, FDEs or whatever
yeah.
it may be. Do you agree?
I think on one hand, software is going to eat services, uh, but on the other hand, there is an opportunity for services to eat software. And then there is the whole notion of the AI native, SaaS native companies coming in and disrupting both software and services. So I think there is going to be this is going to be, as I mentioned, this is a category creation moment. Till now, we
Mm,
know how to buy services and we know how to buy software. This services as software is a bit of services and a bit of software, and we don't know how to sell and buy it. And so there will be losers and winners on both sides. I don't think there is a one category sort of wins argument here. But I think the look at one on I think the LLMs with commoditized, like what difference does it make between Claude and ChatGPT if I'm trying to do invoice processing, right? It's the same capabilities. I think building the agents is also going to get commoditized. Everybody can build their agents and it's getting simpler by the day. The core is going to be what you just articulated, Melissa, is that context or that domain or the industry knowledge or what goes wrong wherever. And I think if we can productize that context, if we can build our value propositions around that context, then I think there is a huge amount of all these price to sales ratio of 1.5x can actually the market cap can increase. But right now, I think the Wall Street uh, doesn't really find it exciting, the services business. So
mm.
we have to make it exciting. And I think the best way is to say we are going after a new category. It's not just services, it's services as software. So on that note, I know we're 1 minute over. We've got 30 more questions to answer, Melissa. So we've got a busy afternoon to look at, and we'll respond to all of them to the extent possible.
Great.
But thank you, Melissa, for your insights, for all your work for the last 10 years on this OneOffice. Hopefully, people found it useful. But let's continue the dialogue. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the engagement. We'll talk soon.